Good evening, everyone. This is Dari on WorldStreams Radio. Thank you to our listeners from all over the world for joining us tonight. Hello and welcome to all of you here with us on paltalk.com. If you'd like to learn more about WorldStreams Radio, visit our website at worldstreams.org. Our guest tonight is linguistics professor and writer Dan Everett. Dan Everett currently serves as chair of the Department of Languages, Literatures, and Cultures at Illinois State University. He previously taught at the University of Manchester and is former chair of the Linguistics Department at the University of Pittsburgh. He's best known for his study of the Amazon Basin's Piraha people and their language. He spent many years living with and studying the Aboriginal Piraha people of Brazil. Their language defies all existing linguistics theories and reflects a way of life that evades contemporary understanding. Over the next 30 years, Dan's studies and research had a very profound effect on his life. They broke up his family, put him at odds with the linguistic establishment, and he became an atheist. His recent book, Don't Sleep, There Are Snakes, Life and Language in the Amazonian Jungle, is his fascinating and candid account of life with the Piraha. Hello, Saeed. Hello and welcome, Dan.
Well, thank you, Dari, and hello, Dari, and good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. And good evening to you, Dan Everett. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me this evening.
It's a real pleasure. I was reading about you, and you seem to have a very interesting background. One of the first things that actually made it possible for you to meet this tribe, I think it's Pidahan, correct?
That's right.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about it is it was religion, missionary work that took you there, and then you discovered them, and then you just said bye-bye religion afterwards. It's such an interesting concept. Please tell me about the background first of how you met this tribe and how you went from there.
Well, I became a Christian in the 60s. I wasn't raised in a religious home at all in Southern California, and I joined a missionary organization that was dedicated to translating the Bible for indigenous tribes around the world, and I was very committed to that at the time. And I was very interested in working in the Brazilian Amazon, and the mission that I was with assigned me to work with this people that no one had been able to figure out their language in all the attempts of the mission, the people called the Piraha. And so I went there as a missionary in December of 1977, and my purpose was to convert them.
Oh, wow. And did that work?
No, I was a pretty spectacular failure. Actually, I read that after I had been there for several years, I discovered some several hundred-year-old documents by early Catholic missionaries in the 1700s who said that they were the most recalcitrant tribe in the Amazon in all the Catholic experience, and they had no better success than I did.
So these people resisted change all these years. And there you are trying to get them indoctrinated into Jesus and so forth. What was their reaction at first, and what was yours also?
Well, they're a very friendly people and a very tolerant people. So they have always listened to me, and they take me seriously as a person. So if I believe these things, they wanted to listen to me. But they never really were challenged to believe these things themselves, because it became clear to them early on that my experience with Jesus and with all these things I was telling them about was not firsthand. I not only had never seen Jesus myself, but I had never met anyone who had seen Jesus. So for them, this was very superstitious, very tenuous. It wasn't something they could take seriously. You just don't tell people about things that you don't have any direct evidence for.
Well, of course, your work went on to understand these people from a linguistic point of view. How long did you spend with them the first time you traveled there? I understand you traveled with your wife, Karen, and how much time did you spend with them at first?
Well, yes, my first wife, Karen, and I and our 3 children, our youngest was 9 months old at the time, we went there, and our first visit as a family lasted only a few weeks because we got malaria, and 2 members of the family almost died. But we've been back several times, and the total amount of time we've lived in the village is over 7 years, almost 8 full years.
So in the 8 full years, you decided, forget about teaching them about Jesus, I want to understand these people. Is that what happened, or did it happen, was there a trigger of some sort, a cultural, linguistic trigger that made you decide to go the other way?
Well, there were a series of things. I mean, I was fascinated by the people even from the time that I was still a Christian because their language was so interesting and their culture was so interesting. But as I began to see more about how they lived and really understand how happy they were, how self-sufficient they were, how little they needed of my culture, and how many lessons I had to learn from their culture, I began to question my own faith. I mean, I had gone there to tell them about a way of life that would make them happy and relieve them from fear, but they feared less than any Christian I knew, and they were happier than just about anyone I had ever met. And their way of life began to challenge me and challenge my way of thinking about God. So after a few years of living with them, I finally had to make the confession to myself and to others that I no longer believed these things that I had gone there to tell them about, but I was still fascinated with their language and fascinated with their culture, so I wanted to stay there and learn more about them.
So instead of you influencing their culture, they influenced you.
Absolutely.
How interesting is that?
Well, I think I'm certainly not the first person who's gone to a tribal society to teach them and only to find out that I was a student. But for me, the way that they affected me was far deeper than I affected them and far deeper than I had ever expected. I mean, they have transformed my way of thinking about everything from linguistic theory to the nature of life.
Well, let's start with that, from nature of life, and then we'll get to linguistic theory a little bit later. How about, what can you tell us about that? What affected you the most?
Well, what affected me the most was to see how they deal with hardship and difficulty. Life in the Amazon is not easy. I mean, life in New York City is not easy either, but we all face difficulties of different types, and they face death, they face short life expectancy, high infant mortality, danger from snake bite, from malaria, from leishmaniasis, a number of things that we don't have to face. I mean, we face dangers in our own ways, but they face dangers every bit as great as anything we face, perhaps greater, and they faced it with grace and without fear and with laughter and with a stoicism and more than stoicism, an enjoyment of life that I had never seen before. And just to sit with Piraha all day, they're so laid back that there are times I fall asleep when they're talking to me because they're just so calm and collected and so deliberate in what they say and so unperturbed by things that bother me, from bugs to hunger. That this was just a real challenge to me. Well,
now wait. You said when they talk to you endlessly, you fall asleep. They talk to you in 8 consonants and 3 vowels, correct?
That's correct. 8 consonants and 3 vowels. But they talk all day long, every day when they're together.